Hello, welcome to this week's segment of Apostleship Across Weekly. We're here live in Long Beach, as you can see by our beautiful chapel. We're here in Long Beach with Brother Robin and Jonathan, and this week we're covering the cross of man, our daily suffering.
So, Robin, you would be the expert since this is part of our spirituality. What is, why do we suffer?
I think we suffer. I would agree with John Paul II when he says, I think it's an essential part of our nature. It's almost inseparable from our existence. Why? I think it evokes a certain kind of solidarity because we're related to each other, and we cannot not be related to each other because we're in a relationship. Then it evokes a certain kind of compassion or suffering with the other. Also, it's like I said, it evokes a certain kind of solidarity to share the suffering of another. I think also earlier, before that, we had an informal conversation, me and John, and I really agree with him that the nature of man, it shows, is kind of fundamentally affected at a very deep level by original sin. And we do certain kinds of things because of this original sin that may be selfish, that may be disregarding of others, and that may be contradictory to our nature.
One of the things when we speak of suffering, not only is it part of our nature, but kind of its purpose in life, is that people will bring up the book of Job, where they say, well, if suffering is fundamental and necessary, then when you look at Job, why does God just make Job suffer for apparently seeming no reason?
St. Paul says, everything turns out for the good or the best for all those who love God. So that's one thing, is it's different to say that God is the author of suffering, and it's also different to say that God allows suffering. One of the big picture views that God could have, and I'm sure He has, is that suffering gives us character. It develops given that, okay, nature has been affected and our nature has been affected, there will be some suffering while we live. But God allows it because on the long run, or maybe even in the short run, it will give us character, it will give us the capacity for frustration, the capacity for problem solving, the capacity to ask for help, even the capacity to forgive.
It reminds me of a parable from Padre Pio, basically. He says that the son is with the mother and he sees the bottom of the thing that she's making, and he says, "Mom, what are you making? It's really ugly. I don't know why you'd be doing something like that." And then she shows him the top of it, and you see the beauty, the vibrance, and everything. And sometimes when it comes to God's plan, we only see the bottom, which might not be perfect or ugly and cause suffering, but in the end, we don't see the top until later.
What it tells me is that in the greater scheme of things, maybe not in this life, maybe in the afterlife, we will see the bigger plan or the bigger scheme of God, in which suffering had a purpose, and in which He used suffering to show His providence, that all the time He was there, and His graces.
Yeah, I like your idea you said earlier, how suffering kind of conditions us towards all things. So it gives us capacity to, you said, a capacity for frustration, a capacity for just to know more resistance of what the thing goes on in life, and I like how you connect that to the weaving of a certain object, and from behind it looks bad, it looks ugly. But when you flip it over, you see the actual pattern. Once you're done weaving, it looks really nice. And I think that's also one thing that we should also look at when it comes to the suffering of man. You know, everything that goes on in the world with society and religion and everything else. That you know, even though we created our own suffering, it's essentially mankind. It's our fault. Everything that goes wrong with our suffering. I think why God allows it, or God does allow it, so that we go stronger, because our suffering makes us resistant to sin, and it makes us, I guess, it makes us closer to being saintly, because we endure more and we know more and get closer to God through our suffering.
In all this, we're talking about why God allows this, and why God allows that to certain kind of people, and to why me, why not, why him. Sorry, why me and why not him. I think it also evokes faith. You know, I think it also evokes faith that God is in charge and He gives, or His providence provides whatever we need for salvation and holiness. And so part of this can be suffering and other blessings and graces. Suffering always creates a certain kind of pain, but He allows things that are, we'd say, opposite of pain. But in the greater scheme of things, it evokes not just character, or gives us character, problem-solving skill, capacity for frustration, but also the faith that He's providing things that are necessary for holiness and sanctity. I mean, I can't imagine, you know, facing God at the end of it all and saying, I had nothing that I can identify with your son's suffering. And how can I expect myself to be here transformed into your son? I think my last comment is I would cite John Paul II in his apostolic letter, Salvifici Doloris. The major thing about suffering is it tells you that man's nature is to go beyond himself. So suffering really is meant to be endured and to go beyond himself, but it involves other people asking for help, compassion, solidarity, empathy, mercy, and all that.
All those things you said, like compassion, solidarity, you know, and consolation, they're like gifts of suffering. When you go through that, you learn how to create that experience.
Yeah, exactly, John. What you're saying is, you really pointed out an important point. There's also, how come people experience the same or more or less similar suffering, but other people take it this different way? So the attitude with which you suffer or deal with suffering also makes a big difference.
It's really determined by that faith. It's a test of faith. Are we going to endure our suffering and persevere because we have faith? Or are we going to give in to it and
see that the cross is the end of it all and not resurrection?
Yeah. Well, with that, Brother Robin, I thank you for being here with us tonight. This is Apostleship of the Cross Weekly with John, Jonathan, and Brother Robin is our special guest. It was nice to see you guys here. We hope you join us next time.
See you next time.
See you next time. See you.